Well, hello again, everybody. And this week we've got a couple of radios to look at. Can you see what they've got in common? I'll give you a couple of seconds. Well, no prizes for guessing that these are both radios made by companies that are better known for what we tend to call white goods, kitchen equipment and things like that. We have a 4-band radio here made by Morphy Richards, and Morphy Richards were quite an old British company really, still going in some form or other, but it's a brand that just makes stuff in China. In fact, it probably was by this time, come to think of it. But they still make lots of, irons, toasters, domestic equipment, but not so much radios. You wouldn't expect them to have made radios, but they did for a time, and this is one of them. 4-band receiver. I wouldn't have thought there was much to me. You'd have thought if you were buying a radio from a kitchen supplier, you'd want something pretty basic. Why would you want the shortwave band? But nevertheless, that's what we've got here. And it's got a 2-way speaker system. I don't think it's going to be of quite the same quality as a 2-way speaker system we saw on that Philips the other week, somehow. It feels very plasticky and very light. That valve set we looked at the other day, I think the switch assembly on that weighed more than this does. Yeah, don't push the switches too hard. So this is the first one. And the other one is by a company called Indesit, which again you will probably have heard of more for their kitchen equipment, fridges, washing machines, things like that. This one to me seems a slightly better, more solid piece of kit. Also a 4-band radio. Has a feeling to me of a sort of Grundig style with this overarching top cover here and the slidey volume control. And the captive mains lead, which has a little space to stow it, supposedly, in the battery compartment at the back. But, of course, you couldn't get the 3-pin mains plug in there. But that does look very Grundig. I wonder if it was something that Grundig actually made. Now, I don't have a date of manufacture, nor do I have any documentation for either of these radios. I'm guessing they're sort of 1980s, although this one does feel a little more 70s-ish, or maybe late 70s. Actually, this is pretty definitely late 70s or later than that, because it's got radio 2 in 2 places on the medium wave. So I think I'd date both of them around late 70s, early 80s. This one looks more 80s like to me. Does this have any markings for stations on it? They're very difficult to see because this perspex here is quite clouded. But no, there are no station markings on this, so that doesn't date it. But it just looks 80s, doesn't it? Let's start with this one. It's got a... both of them have got a mains input. This one has the usual figure of 8 connector. This one, as I said, has a captive mains lead, but unfortunately it's fitted with one of these dangerous old plugs. Well, they weren't that dangerous in the day, but nowadays they're expected to have shrouding on them. And I notice it's got a 13 amp fuse, and the chances of this pulling 13 amps are not very high. So both of them will operate on mains or batteries. We'll start with this one first, plug it into the mains, and see what we get.
It was the blind stone, or word stone effect was a big slogan in those days, immediately following the war. Get the boys home.
Well, that's rather poor quality long wave reception of Radio 4. Now this is an interesting thing. It's got an LED meter here, but it's not a tuning strength meter. It's just like a VU meter, depending on how far you got the volume up. That makes it absolutely pointless. What's the point of telling you how loud it is? Because you can hear how loud it is. That's just a pointless addition to me. If they made it into a signal strength meter, I could have thought that maybe there was something about it. So, yeah, not that brilliant on long wave, but we know that's not long for this world anyway. Let's try it on medium.
Search the vessel to assess what the contraband is, if there's any contraband there. But as your other guest said, there would be a fair amount, there would be a fairly decent amount of intelligence on what's going on anyway. And
so that's 5 live. As you'll notice, it's got bass and treble controls, but it's in any position. It seems to be very tinny. I don't think that's much of a bass unit, really.
If they decide that they want to have further...
We should have TalkSport down here somewhere.
What else? But because they're constantly built up into this mindset by aspects of the media or the public saying, you're the main man, no, you're the manager. And you're the manager and you work for someone else, and when you run something and you're the paymaster, you can say what you want. Until then, you've got to sort of stay in your lane a little bit. And that's unfortunately what immature managers do at certain times. They forget where
Well, immature managers shouldn't be working for Simon Jordan, should they? TalkSport is a bit faint, but I've noticed that on a couple of radios recently, and I have a feeling TalkSport are reducing the power of their medium wave transmitters, which does feel to me like we're in the last throes of AM in this country now. TalkSport and 5 Live were about the same a few months ago, but TalkSport seems weaker now, and obviously they have a more commercial imperative than the BBC does. They can't just sort of blow public money at it. I don't think they'll completely abandon it until the BBC abandons medium wave, which is supposed to be at the end of next year. So medium wave is very much as you'd expect. I don't think we'll get much on shortwave at this time. We can try. Well, it works, but as I say, there's nothing to hear at this time. Let's try VHF. We probably will need the aerial up for this. Ah, it's very stiff. Yeah. Oh, it's both stiff and floppy at the same time.
Here we are, get ready.
Write your own jokes, people. Alright, let's see what we can get here. Very noisy.
Really sorry, and we must be good and wait till the Allies came.
After all these years and so lost.
So for the last day of the month, we'll be live from March. Expect a celebration of the Fenland town in all its quirky, goosey glory.
Indeed, let's go and all stand around the railway yard and have a laugh. Well, decent reception enough on FM, a bit noisy though, and sound quality well below par, I would have said. There doesn't seem to be a lot wrong with it, does there? Apart from that tuning is a bit stiff. Maybe we can do something about that, or maybe it'll just end up with me breaking the tuning scale. So, yeah, I'm not sure I'm getting much content out of this. We're going to have to take it apart and have a look inside it anyway, aren't we? Just to see what we've got. So let's do that now. Right, let's take the battery cover off. Quite a nice finish on the back of here, actually. Don't know if you can really see it. It looks like it's quite a nice sort of semi-textured finish. And it doesn't appear on the front of the unit. I don't know why. I've seen this sometimes. People put a nice finish on the back of something that you're never going to see. What is the point? I don't see a screw in the battery compartment here. 4 C cells it takes, so we could try it on that later. I can see a load of screws in the back. Looks like these 5 here, so let's get those out and see what we can see. Right, so it comes apart from the front. When you have to take the knobs off the front to get the thing apart. What have we got? Fairly modern stuff. It's IC based. Can't quite see what the ICs are there, but I'm guessing that's a radio on a chip type thing, and that's an audio amplifier. And probably a couple of transistors for the FM front end. Very tiny ferrite rod aerial here. Rather complicated here. The tuning threading, it does feel very stiff. I have a feeling that though trying to take this apart might be more trouble than it's worth. Yes, so this meter with the rather cloudy front panel off, we can see is labelled as power level, and it goes from -1 to 2 to +1 to +2, so I'm not sure quite what that means. It's obviously not in decibels. It's just one of these fake meters to just make it do something and look good. What Alan Sugar, I believe, used to call the mug's eyeful. Yeah, not a massive amount to see, really. Looking at the speakers, there's not really much in this speaker, is there, to make it a bass unit? I mean, it doesn't. There is actually a separate tweeter here, but they could do with a bit more oomph there, I think. That's going to be the biggest problem with the sound. I bet if we could get a bigger speaker in there, it would sound a lot better. But is it worth it? Probably not, given the cheapness general undesirability of this radio, I wouldn't really bother with it. What I might do is try and polish up this window here and see if we can get better visibility through it, but I think that's all we can do really. So Morphy Richards didn't do a lot for us, did it? That was a pretty cheap radio with very little to recommend it, and not worth doing much about it really. This one looks a little more promising. It feels heavier, but I've noticed that we have no tuning. That goes round and round and round, and the pointer stays where it is. So I'll try plugging it in with this iffy plug just to, well, we can clearly get some sound. Yeah, very noisy volume control, just really needs cleaning up. Top cut type tone control, in other words, not really a tone control, but everything seemed to make a noise. So with this one, it appears we just need to look at the tuning mechanism. I'm slightly worried about this because this thing, it's not just that it doesn't move, it's that it's in the middle and this thing doesn't appear to have any resistance. So we may not be able to fix this. Another thing which makes me think this has origins in the Grundig world is the fact that it has a mains battery switch on it, which is a very Grundig thing to have. How do I get this apart? I can only see one screw here. I'm sure there ought to be more than one screw needed to take it apart, but we'll take that screw out and see what happens. Right, the answer is you lift the handle up, and when you lift the handle up there's a couple of little things there you can push and the back comes off. And we have this. It's quite a nice looking circuit board really, actually. It looks well laid out. Every component is labelled. That thing there looks like it might have been a DIN socket at some point. Here's our rather dodgy slider, so it should be pretty easy to clean. That's an open sort of thing. But how do we get at the tuning mechanism? I was just slightly worried that maybe as well... No, those are very fine wires on the ferrite rod, but I don't think they've come apart, and it was making a noise, so that would support that viewpoint. I can see some screws that have got green paint, or at least one screw that's got green paint on it. What else would hold that in? I suppose we'll have to take the knob off that thing there, maybe, and maybe take the aerial out. I can see some of the cord on this side is intact. Right, you do just take that one screw out and then the whole thing unclips in a very violent manner when you push these buttons in. Oops. And I did take that connector off the aerial to make it a bit easier, and otherwise, yeah, it just pulls out like that, and I've unclipped these wires here, and this can then move out of the way, although there's a couple of other wires which seem to go to the mains transformer. They did go to the mains transformer and one of them's fallen off, so that needs to be put back now. There is a little spring in here which isn't engaged with anything. I don't know whether it is supposed to be engaged with anything. I think this may have been for a different mechanism that the spring is on there, because it doesn't seem to affect it. The only thing is there's these slots here. The slots obviously engage with the tuning capacitor here, so the problem seems to be that the slots aren't engaging with the tuning capacitor, and that's why it was just going round. But if it wasn't engaging with the tuning capacitor, the station wouldn't change, but the pointer wasn't moving either. So I'm not completely convinced we've got this sussed. Right, so I think what's actually supposed to happen here was that spring, which is on both sides of the cord, was originally connected to a little lug there which is broken off, and that's why it had fallen apart, and then there's not enough tension in the thing to move the tuning capacitor around. So fortunately there's a spare one here, so I've stretched the spring onto that, and that definitely gives a much better action here. So looking at the data mark near 88 here, you can see there's a little yellow dot on a red line. So at that point, if I turn that over, you can see that there is a pair of slots that is just about vertical that I can slot that into. And as I turn it to move this way, the effect will be to move this in that direction. So it needs to be at that end, and when I slot that in, that hopefully will click into that. It's a bit awkward because this thing not being done with screws and just being done with little plastic clips, and also you've got to get that slider into the control knob as well at the same time. It's a bit of an operation which is an all or nothing, and presumably if you do it more than 1 or 2 times you'll start breaking the tabs off and it won't stay put. But we'll have a go. Right, well, my theory on how to put this back together and keep the tuning intact turned out to be, shall we say, wrong, because I started by putting it on this mark here and lining the tuning capacitor up with that, but then found that everything was completely wrong and it sort of maxed out about here, and I was miles up the scale and wasn't getting anything down the lower end. It sort of made sense to me at the time, but it obviously wasn't the right way to do it. So I tried it the other way round, which was to wind it to the other end as far as it would go over here, and then it was vertical with it against an end stop. And at that point, when I put it back together, and it is a bit of a nuisance as I expected, trying to get the thing to line up and engage when you haven't got any leverage over it. You've just got one push and click and that's it. But it wasn't that far out then, and with a bit of tweaking I managed to get the FM pretty much in line.
On the BBC Sounds app, on your smart speaker,
play BBC Radio Cambridgeshire,
and on your radio.
The sound of Cambridgeshire
is BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
At 4 o'clock, with the latest BBC News for Cambridgeshire, I'm Paul Hayes. 3 men have this afternoon been sentenced to conditional discharges and a suspended sentence after stealing 5 puppies from a laboratory near Huntingdon. Steve Clay runs the Cambridge City Food Bank.
We've been around for 16 years, and there's been that growth really over that period across the country. And a country as prosperous as the UK, we shouldn't be in that situation. So we do want to see a day when people don't have to rely upon food banks.
And a professional bowls player from Australia has been stuck in Cambridge due to the conflict in the Middle East. Glenn Martin travelled to the Chesterton Indoor Bowls Club to take part in the World Indoor Bowls Tour at the start of the month, but hasn't been able to find flights to go home. Members of the local club adopted him, and he's kept himself busy by exploring the local area.
The sound.
The sound of Cambridgeshire. And all the music you love. BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. Good afternoon.
I think even if it had been the 6-day war in the Middle East, you'd have run out of things to explore in Chesterton before the end of it. So, in this England versus Italy match, I'm afraid to say that it does appear that Italy have come out on top. Although I don't know whether this was actually made in Italy, and I know this wasn't actually made in England. Neither of these companies make radios anymore. I think Indesit did actually have quite a respectable audio-visual business at some point. Maybe we didn't see very much of it over here in the UK, but it looks as if they did actually take the making of radios and TVs seriously, but they don't anymore. This is not really a Morphy Richards product, is it? I mean, it's a bit like when you get those little radios when you go to Silverstone, or when you get them, I say when you get sold them at a ridiculous price to stick in your ear at Silverstone to hear the commentary. Nobody thinks they're actually designed by Ross Brawn or anything like that. There's probably a generic company somewhere that made radios and you just gave them your logo and they stuffed it on the front of it. But it's a bit of an insight into the fact that these companies were once in that arena. And of course Grundig, who we are always acknowledged on this channel and made some of the best radios ever, nowadays are a brand name only for white goods. And I don't think they sell very much in this country, but I think they do sell them a lot in Ireland and in continental Europe. Makes me wonder what it would have been like if some of our more traditional firms had done the same pivot. Hacker would probably have made a washing machine that required a 3-phase supply, and Roberts would have put an LCD display on a simulation of a 1960s twin tub. Companies go into certain markets, they try things, they abandon things when they don't work. As you can hear, neither radios are absolutely top in sound quality. This one actually is absolute rubbish, really. This one, on the other hand, is okay, and as good as a lot of mid-range radios that we've looked at on this channel. If I were going to make more use of it, I'd probably do something about that top cut, which I think, as you heard, if I kept that bit of video, is a bit too severe, and with the top cut out it's a bit too bright. That's very common for these sort of things. On the other hand, the tone controls for this, it doesn't sound anywhere near acceptable unless you wind the bass all the way up and the treble all the way down. So obviously nobody thought of testing this in the factory. So basically, this one's rubbish. This one looks like it's pretending to be a Grundig. It's not rubbish, but it's no Grundig. And that's about it. Hope you found that interesting. I'll see you on the next one.